No rush at all. Good seeing you. Stop by our booth if you get a chance later or tomorrow. Okay.
You actually took me up on it.
You did. You shaved us to the front row.
But then I'll stand here the entire time.
That'll be fine.
But I'll hold water at this
That'll be fine. I'm old, I can't hear, so.
Come on in.
Uh-oh. No, come back.
Hey Ted, how are you? Good to see you, man. Good to see you. Yeah, wow. It's been a while. And the last time I was out your way, I think was the last time I saw you. Yeah.
Me and two guys from Arizona.
That's fair now. How you doing?
Good to see you.
Their
Cool. You found it. This is where it's happening, by the way.
Now you got a lot to live up to.
How are you?
Good to see you. How are things?
Forever.
I know. I had to come keep coming to get the TV.
It's Friday. It's not today. We're not giving one away in here.
Oh, I know. Get ready. Golf was strenuous. But my shoulders and arms were so yeah, that's what she said. She's not allowed to do TV. 3 times every one that y'all swung. Like 3 times.
Never went over anything, but it's still awesome.
Mom did her best. She did her best. She first to take off his mask. But she gave it a good college try. But we admired the whole time. Yeah, you don't, aren't you tired? It didn't work. Oh, I know. What did you do? Did you good? I did. There was nothing in that. I mean, there was nothing in there that I really needed. He was drooling, so I was just like, okay. You gotta have at least 2. And, yeah, 2. Got it. So sure, it's like
We'll make that happen.
and then we use tags. So yeah, so he was like,
Well, I think we're going to start this thing. I'm not quite sure what this thing is, but we'll get it underway. It feels good to be back. I haven't. It's been a little while since I've been in Nickel Giza and been traveling quite a bit, and it's great to be back. It really is. And thank you for taking some time out to listen to me pontificate, because that's what I'll do. Some reflections and thoughts on what's happening and what's going on. For those of you who think I'm John Loy, I'm not. And those of you who know John Loy know I'm not John Loy. But we're going to talk about what's happened in the data center, and what's going to happen, and how it matters, and what it means today. Because if you take a moment and realize things have changed. You know, we've noticed all along the way, while we've been working, while we've been dealing with change and dealing with all the stuff that's going on, the entire world that we're in has changed. It's not only that my hair got grayer, I got older, and my kids all moved out and have gone on their own. The world that we're working in is a different one than when we started. And it's not just a subtle difference, it's a dramatic difference. We're now in a world that is totally data-centric and cloud-driven. The cloud is driving the direction. But the underlying issue that is changing everything is this never-ending tsunami of data. It just doesn't quit. IBM says that in the last 2 years, we've created 90% of all the data in human history. There was another one that I read about 6 months ago that said in the last 3 years, we've created more data than in all of human history combined. And that statistic will continue to go on for the next 10 years. When we think about the amount of that and the disruptive nature of what that means in the data center, it is astounding. It is the single greatest disruptor we have, because every one of those ones and zeros, every one of them, we've got to move them through the networks. We've got to process them. We've got to store them. We've got to back them up. We've got to secure them. Every one of those ones and zeros has to be loved. Every one of them. And it's not just getting bigger stuff, bigger cans to put them in, or more powerful processors, or bigger pipes. Because that's not working real well either anymore, because it takes more and more and more to manage all of this stuff. But all of that's happened, and it's going to continue to happen and continue to grow. I'm supposed to have a thing. Don't mind me. I'm new at this. I mean, if we look back, we've gone through mainframe, client server, consolidated storage, virtualization, and to the cloud. And yet, all of those still persist. They're all still here. If I'd have told you 8 years ago that in 10 years, you'd be able to stick 200 terabytes of flash in the belly of a server, you'd have laughed at me. If I'd have told you 10 years ago, 8 years ago, that in 10 years, you'd have a 100 terabyte solid state drive, you'd have said, what would I do with all that? But if you knew that was the case, and you knew it was going to grow like it's grown, would you have architected differently? Would you have spent money and made decisions in a different fashion? Yeah, you would have. But all too often, we have to react to what's going on right in front of us. We have to react to the budgets that we're getting, to the staff that we've got. Even though we try to architect for these things, we still have the real world, day-to-day, what do we have to do? And that drives where we end up going. Here's another interesting piece of data I just picked up. In 1955, if you go back, Fortune 500 companies have started disappearing. Okay? Back in 1955, the average life expectancy of a Fortune 500 company was 75 years. It's now 50. Things are changing at an incredible rate around us. And in the government space, we have something that is entirely different than what those folks deal with. Your entity ain't going nowhere. It's going to outlive every one of us in the room. So in IT, our responsibility to these ones and zeros is a little bit different than just getting our paycheck. It's a little bit different than just keeping the current management team happy. We've got an obligation to the constituents that aren't even born yet, to the data that we're messing with today. Who says that in the year 2040, there's going to be a freshman at NC State that needs some information that at this point, everybody thinks is totally worthless. But that information is a key data point in them possibly revolutionizing something. But in the government space, we have a different obligation than they do in the public space. And we have to keep looking forward, hanging on to what's behind us, and making today work. And of course, doing it with just gobs of money. Right? I mean, you've all got more money than you can spend, and more people than you can deploy, and just time for vacations. Right? I just want to make sure I'm talking to the right folks. I've said this, I don't know how many times, but I've yet to call on the IT staff that has too many people, that's got too much money. It doesn't happen. IT in almost every environment, especially in government space, is overhead. We're overhead. And when we go asking for money, what happens? When we go asking for money, they say, well, what do you need it for? Well, I need $500,000, so they got to do this, blah, blah, blah. And they sit there, their eyes start glassing over, and they say, well, can you do it for $200? Because they don't get it. And sometimes they do get it, but they can't come up with the funds. So we are driven by what we can get our hands on. We have been, we will continue to be. But it's the nature of what we deal with. With the rapidly growing data and the fact that we have state-sponsored terrorist threats, whether it's in North Korea or the Russian mob or China, they're going after golf club manufacturers. You don't think the information you have is important to them? And if you don't think that as a form of warfare, it's cheaper to employ an entire room full of hackers with all the network capabilities and processing capabilities and anything that they need, it's a lot cheaper to do that than to build an army. That's the world we live in. Not that you guys don't know this, but I spend a lot of time traveling. I got nothing to do but think about it. But it's real. So the threats are coming from everywhere, not just some bored kid who's tired of playing Xbox that wants to get in. They're coming from everywhere. And what's been the response from vendors has been, oh, this stuff is growing. We got to come up with new stuff. And we've seen a lot of really cool new stuff. There's a lot of bright, shiny objects that do really cool things that then gets eclipsed by the next shiny object. And our technologies, literally by the time we deploy them, if you think about this, if we've got a new project, so we go through the studying, we put it all together, we get the implementation plan, we cut the purchase orders, it comes in, we start getting everything up and running. By the time we get it up and running, the next generation of product is already out the door. And 3 years down the road, the stuff that we're generally running is, in the manufacturer's terminology, obsolete. It still runs, still does what we bought it for, but things have changed. There's more layers that are needed. There's more processing power that's needed. It just continues to grow. And the question that most people have when they get the time to think about it is, so what's the direction? Where are we going? Now, this isn't a bad story. It's just what is. It's the nature of what we do. I gave a presentation 5-6 years ago, and I used the line quite frequently that if there is a single word that can describe IT, that word is change. I don't think we manage technology anymore. I think we manage change. That's the harder part, is change. Not only of the people that we have from the end users, but from the people we report to the technology that we have to deploy, the new applications that are coming out, the new ways to do it. How many ways can you sit here and think about that you can deploy a new application? How many different ways can you design an architecture? How many different ways can you solve a problem today? There's a bunch. Is there a right one? Because they all still work. See, that's the underlying issue, is they all still work. They all still work. And at the end of the day, with all of the issues and all the things that you are facing, I like the font. What happened is we had to transfer it over to a USB drive and stick it in there because my PC doesn't have the right port to go into this thing, and my fonts went wacko. I'm just trying to let you know that I really didn't create this up. I really could make it improvement. Okay, that's just, I'm babbling. I shouldn't do that, should
Change.
Change.
Proves the
That's how
point.
fast things are changing.
There you go. But what you still have to do on a daily basis, 24/7, 365, is you have to provide and ensure that everything that you're running is always available all of the time with maximum throughput, and anything short of that is failure on your part. Okay? Regardless of your architecture, regardless of the cause. If something goes down and your phone starts ringing, do they care why? The first question is when, not why. So everything has to be available. It has to perform. Has to perform. They hit a return key, they're expecting it to come back. Now. Not tomorrow. Now. And how many forms of access from where is expected today? Let's go back to the mainframe. Remember the mainframe? We had one terminal. Well, we had a bunch of terminals, but it was home run right to it, and that was the only point of access to the systems. Right? We had it locked down, we had it tied down, we knew exactly what to do with it. And today, I can get into it with something that I carry around in my pocket. So can anybody else. And they want to. Now, should they? That's another discussion. But the point is we need to provide and maintain access and access control from devices and individuals. And security. That's the toughest one. That one's really getting harder. The threats continue. The points of vulnerability seem to get larger. I have a customer, he's the CIO of the largest bank in the state of Oklahoma. And I had him chatting over coffee one day. I asked him, I said, what keeps you up at night? And he said, well, that one's easy. I don't want to see my face on the front page of the New York Times next week because of the data breach. Yeah, I get that one. I mean, it was funny when we were talking, that was when the CIA, we publicly saw that the CIA had been breached. And that somebody was going to announce station chief over in Europe because they had breached the CIA system. Now, when you think about the resources that they have available for security, both intellectually and financially, and they're getting hacked. So I asked him, I said, so how are you doing with security? And he said, said, well, we're pretty good. We keep things current, and we follow the best procedures we can. We don't have unlimited resources. He says, it's kind of like buying insurance. Do you ever have enough? Can you ever spend enough? He said, and I said, so how have you been successful at not having a breach? And he kind of laughed and said, we're not that attractive of a target. That's the security that's kept them out of trouble. He said they're not attractive enough yet. My point to you is that you're very attractive targets. You're very attractive targets. And I think you know that. So, I just like to bring that one up because that always makes everybody smile. It's like talking about backup. Anybody like backup? I've never seen a hand go up, so I just anyway. And I think the underlying piece in all of this, when we talk about the needs of our friends in IT, of you folks, of the environment that we all work in, is that our systems, our processes, and everything we do has to have an underlying foundation of being flexible. Flexible, so that I can manage what's going to happen, not just take care of what's happening. I've got to be able to manage what is coming, that I don't put myself in a corner. The answer. I love this picture. It's a cloud. It solves all of our problems. Just talk to somebody who doesn't work in IT. Right? Unicorns and rainbows. The cloud. What's interesting is regardless of what you read and where you read it, the overriding consensus of Gartner, it's actually a pretty smart bunch of folks, Forrester, and a plethora of all vendors, is that is where we're headed. The cloud is the answer. And I would tend to agree with that statement, but I'll put some caveats on it. The answer lies over the horizon. It's not today, but it is over the horizon. I don't know how long that horizon is away from us. And the cloud is not defined as AWS or Azure. That's a public cloud. And we all know what a cloud is. It's somebody else's data center, maybe. That's what it is. But Gartner also tells us that a cloud has some characteristics to it. Scalability, automation, security, swift ability to execute. Nowhere in there was there low cost, by the way. That wasn't in the equation. So what does that horizon look like? What is the cloud? The future will not be AWS. The future will be public clouds, but it will also be private clouds. We call them hybrids, because nobody's got a better term yet. Right? And the private cloud is your data center that has those same characteristics. So we're going to have a blending of the two. And we have to manage through that, because that is where we are going. All the smart minds say so. And until somebody develops a true quantum computer that we can run on our desktop that takes care of absolutely everything with maximum security, I think we're still headed that way. I'm not saying that that isn't going to happen, but I don't know where. Don't know when. But unicorns and rainbows, that's where we're headed. Clearly headed. So if that's where we're going, and the reason I have this conversation at all, it goes back to what I started with. If I told you 8 years ago that in 10 years you'd have 100 terabyte solid state drive would you architect your environment differently? And I believe the answer is yes, you would, if you knew that. Well, we do know we're headed to the cloud. So what do we need to do to get there? What do we need to do today to prepare for there? Because the underlying reason behind all of this is if we know we're going in that direction, every dollar we spend, every resource we allocate needs to be an investment in that direction. Not just a bright shining object that fits and solves the today problem. If that bright shiny object does not fit in the direction of that, I shouldn't be doing it. I need to find something else that fits in the direction. What we understand is that everything needs to be virtualized. Virtualized. Now, when I talk about virtualization, I am not talking about consolidating hardware and putting a bunch of VMs on a server. That is an example of it, but that's what started changing everything in IT. When VMware started creating that, we can go back to the days of virtual iron as one of the earlier pioneers. These folks were able to bring multiple VMs onto a piece of hardware. That's the beginning of it. But let's talk about a definition of virtualization, because to me it's the underlying element that makes the future possible. And what virtualization is, you know, you can ask 5 people and you'll get 7 answers. But the only answer that matters is mine, because I'm right. Would you agree, Bruce?
Yes. Oh.
Cool, thank you. Amen.
I was feeling it.
Feel the love in the room.
Okay.
But virtualization to me is the liberation of software and data from hardware. The liberation of software and data from hardware so that you can cut and paste and drag and drop anything without disruption to the end user. Okay? Cut and paste, drag and drop, do whatever. I want a system over here, drag it over, it goes. I need more bandwidth, a couple of clicks, boom, open a pipe, run it. I want to set up a new system. All of it being automated, everything running the way it's supposed to. So that the people in IT are using their brains about the applications, not using their talents to create a VLAN or map a LUN or figure out a new backup process. Just click and go. And if you go back to the definition of cloud, included in that is automation. Automation of tasks. Cut and paste and drag and drop anything. A virtual foundation is absolutely mandatory. And that's across all aspects of the data center. Not just servers. We've done a really good job as an industry on servers. Not just on storage. We've done a really good job on storage as well. The network, we're lagging way behind there. Cisco's done a fantastic job as the dominant network vendor. Right? Fantastic job. I get up in the mornings and bow to San Francisco. I really do. Tremendous company led by incredible people. But the underlying element in Cisco's world is proprietary hardware. It's proprietary hardware. And while today they do offer VMware's NSX, but it's running on proprietary hardware. So it's kind of like, okay, what am I doing? Right? So that's an element that's emerging and evolving. But the entire data center needs this. We need to do it on what has become known as converged hardware. And I've really worked with this one. Maybe somebody here can help me with this one. But converged, hyperconverged, it's like, okay, wait a minute. I have read 27 different definitions between the two, and I still don't know what it is. And I sell both of them. So just know that where I'm going with this is that the hardware manufacturers got exceptionally good at making things smaller, faster, and fitting into smaller spaces so I can take different components and put them into a box that then I've got to manage. Going back up to the virtualization piece. But for that to work, it needs to be open hardware. open hardware, not proprietary. Because proprietary hardware locks me in to a specific manufacturer. It locks me in and reduces my options and increases my costs. And as we move forward, the hardware needs to be a decreasing portion of our expenditures because more of it has to go into software so that we can handle the automation we need to do to handle this never-ending tsunami. Oh, and by the way, that tsunami keeps getting bigger. It's not that it just keeps pounding us, it keeps getting bigger. How big? I love talking about this. I really do. I was on the phone today with a customer. He's got 10 petabytes that he needs to get under control. 10 petabytes. And he's growing at 7 a year. Petabytes a year. Okay. I tell a story about one of my customers in North Carolina, out on the coast, that about 8, 9 years ago bought their first storage area network from him. Okay? This customer, at the time, said, Paul, this is going to work, I'm happy with it, but you're overselling me. You're way overselling me. He said, I don't know what I'm going to do with all this space. It was a 2.4 terabyte SAN. That customer today has multiple storage devices and over 250 terabytes of space. In like 8 years. The important point to that, as another data point in this growth and the disruption of it, is that in that short period of time, we didn't move the decimal only one time, we moved it twice. That's how fast it's changing, and how we have to get control over it and understand the relationship between the costs that we have to deploy and manage and where that cost needs to go, and that's the underlying reason behind open hardware. If all you've got is a backup tape, God be with you. God be with you. Today, every one of our entities absolutely relies on us being up and running today, regardless of what happens. Regardless if we're on the coast and the hurricane's coming. Regardless of an ice storm. Regardless of ransomware. Regardless of a security attack. What happens if your systems are down today? Do they just shut the county down and everybody go home? So, today's IT environment is no longer about backup. Not that it has been for quite a while. But it's not about backup. Backup is a word that's got to be thrown away. We need robust disaster recovery. Because it's not about backing up data. It's about being able to recover our systems and our data that lost and maintaining integrity and getting it up quickly, regardless of the situation. It's expensive, relatively, but it has to be done. And it's our responsibility in IT to make sure that the managers, the elected officials, understand that. They don't want to spend the money. I get that. Nobody does. But it's our responsibility to let them know that if this would happen, we'd be down for about 4 days. And they go, well, how can you fix that? Then when you tell them, they say, well, can you do it for less? But the point is that you need to shift the burden from IT to those who have the money. And if they choose not to do it, you move the burden to where it belongs. So think about those scenarios. Robust disaster recovery is absolute necessity today. Workable. Obviously, you need to build an environment that is resilient and robust, that will stay up. But it's IT. Stuff happens. Okay? Stuff still happens. And we've talked about security. I'm not going to go there anymore. We understand the needs for security. We've got to get better and better and current, etc. And then we, of course, have to have, I believe, going forward, an open network networks have to change. Networks have to be more dynamic, not so intensive with intellectual capital. They've needed to be to get to where we are, but now we need to evolve into one that they do things quickly and affordably. There's my definition. I don't need that. This picture is a really poor attempt on my part to try to define that thing over the horizon. It's understanding that it's all cloud, and that up in the public cloud, we will not be putting our sensitive data. It's never been. We're not going to put it up there. It's just not going to happen. We're not going to put our constituent social security numbers up there. We're not going to put our sensitive tax information up there. We're not going to put sensitive data up into a public cloud. It's not going to happen. It's happened and it's happening, but you read and you study and you talk, which I get to do a lot of. And the overwhelming discussion from CIOs is that the sensitive stuff does not go up there. What goes up there are the user interfaces, disaster recovery as a service. Those types of elements can go up there. Infrastructure as a service. And our archive capabilities can go up into the public cloud. Our sensitive stuff can stay in our own private cloud. Our databases, keeping them close and keeping them tight, keeping them small and high performance with scalability and accessibility and automation. But to do that, again, this is over the horizon. Yes, it's happening today, but not so much at our levels. We are heading in that direction, clearly heading in that direction. But to do that, we're going to need some software to manage between the two, to manage this. Something like vCloud Air, VirtuStream. These are emerging as tools to manage between a public and a private cloud in that hybrid space. Also, our networks need to be able to dynamically manage our IPs back and forth. That's where a software-defined network comes into play, because they're designed to do that. The one that I'm most familiar with is actually VMware's NSX. Handles that piece and the automation piece masterfully today. It also brings in another point that comes back to the security piece of all of this. Look at how we handle security today. The firewall is our primary defense. It's our primary defense to keep people out. I liken it to a castle with a moat and archers up in the turret, okay? You put everything, all your resources to keep everybody out with everything that you've got. But if they breach the wall, you're in trouble. And that's how it is today. Hackers get inside and they wait, because they're infinitely patient. Infinitely patient, waiting for the time where they can go pull information and go back and be silent and slip out the back door. More often than not, people who have been hacked don't even know it's happened if they were after information. Don't even know it's happened until it's been found out in some other fashion. What happens with NSX, the reason I bring it up, is it's got an element in it that I think is critical in helping in this area of security. It's called microsegmentation. And if you haven't heard of it, what it does is that it takes your environment and allows you to build individual silos inside the wall so that you can take it down to the file level, so that if somebody gets in, they can't get outside that silo. They're put into a microsegment so that they can't just run around free if they get in. It's just another layer on that security piece. Again, active and robust disaster recovery. And now we get down to the private cloud, to your own data center. Today, your data center today, and where to go, and what are we to do? And the options really come down to building our infrastructures to virtualize it using converged or hyperconverged technologies today. All open-based, all flexible, and all that can be replaced easily or added to. Think of it as Lego, okay? So I can put some Legos together, add to them, pull out some, put others in. But that's how the hardware base needs to be. Tools like vSAN, vCenter, VxRail, VxRack, vBlock, Nutanix. Oh, and guess what? I carry all of those things. Those are just the ones that I know about. You've got a lot of options and a lot of ways to go. But the important thing is to virtualize that data center, utilizing an infrastructure that you can manage and grow with. And finding the tools and the people to help you get that done. Because again, it comes back to a very simple thing. We don't have all the resources we need. We just don't have them. So if I did this right, I've got 7 minutes for questions. And because I know I fascinated you for the last 40 minutes. Okay, Chris, it wasn't fascinating. But it's a dialogue that I think is critically important. You have a sacred trust with your constituents. And you have to. Your responsibility is to look forward while taking care of what's behind you. And to get there, you need to make sure that every dollar you invest of the citizens' tax dollars are going into something that makes sense today and tomorrow. Questions? Anything?
I got one.
Yes, sir.
One of your previous slides, you mentioned a robust hypervisor, something like that.
I said robust disaster recovery.
I was looking at a hypervisor.
Okay.
Slide. I
Okay.
just wondering what you meant by
If that's on there, then I maybe mistyped it, but the hypervisors, I mean, today there are two that are dominating the marketplace. You know, both Microsoft and VMware, and both are tremendous products. And I don't think a customer can make a mistake going with either one of those entities. They're all going to be around. So those hypervisors, once you lock in, I don't see many customers with more than one, because it's just too many resources to manage. So intellectually, you've got to have so many people that can handle the environment. So I think if my terminology said robust hypervisor, that was probably a mistake on my part. But a hypervisor lies at the heart of the virtualization technology. So whether it's VMware or Microsoft, Microsoft is continuing to make, over the past 10 years in the hypervisor world, Microsoft has just been a little bit behind VMware on all the feature sets, but those feature sets, 70% of the customers don't need the stuff that maybe VMware does. But Microsoft has always had a history of 1.0 is okay, 2.0 is pretty good, and 3.0 is rock solid. That's a broad brush statement across a lot of different products. And the work that they continue to do and the advancements and the integrations into their products with their hypervisors is phenomenal. So those two tend to dominate. I mean, I'm not trying to discount Citrix in this, but I see those two as the long-term players in it. Yes, sir.
If you were to guess, what would you foresee happening with the acquisition of EMC with Dell and all of the data storage components technology that they already have?
Well, I think an important point is that the industry is changing as well. I mean, the vendors are changing. I mean, EMC and Cisco have had a relationship that has been, well over a decade of the two of them working tightly together. Now with Dell Technologies owning EMC, and while Michael Dell has publicly said this relationship is going to continue and continue in a strong fashion, both sides need to protect their ongoing revenue streams, but I would venture to say that what's going to happen is there will be incentives from Dell for their sales organization to move Dell servers, VMware, and some open networking products that will not exist in the Cisco side. And Dell is not going to sell Cisco, but the V-Block stuff will continue because there's a lot of customers with all of that. That's just one piece of it. If you look at the merging of those two, I mean, other than disrupting relationships, which is important, you've now got the largest player in IT in one company that's virtually number one in almost all the markets that they compete in, depending upon who you look at, et cetera, whether it's Gartner, whether it's market share, or whether it's dollars spent, or whatever. They can almost claim that across the board in all of that they do. That's the today thing. I think the tomorrow thing is even more important, with VMware being part of that. I think you'll see changes in VMware. Not so much as the innovation is going to continue. You'll see elements of it more readily available across more products under that banner. I think you may see a change in the licensing scheme too. The reason Microsoft had a real opening in VMware, I mean, in creating a hypervisor, was the licensing costs of VMware. Well, it's in Dell Technologies' best interest that VMware is everywhere. Well, how do you do that? You give us the licensing costs. So I think we'll see that. You'll also see emerging of some of the products together. I mean, there's some overlap. There's some. I mean, EMC's got a wealth of enterprise-level storage, enterprise products. Dell does too. So they got to sort that out. I mean, they've been working on it for a long time. I'm sure there are some roadmaps that I've seen, things of that nature about how those things are managed. But there's also the understanding of the enormous amount of R&D money that they are investing on where they're headed and the resources that they command. So it's a powerful force to pay attention to. I mean, not necessarily buy into, but pay attention to, because again, it's also disruptive relationships. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Maybe a sign of too little, too late, and not touting one over another, but you get a corporation like Oracle, and again, this little fish buys this, the little fish buys that. Their product portfolio of Sun acquired this, and they acquired Sun, and this, that, and they have these incredibly supercomputerish type proprietary stuff, maybe so. I think going more open, I know.
Yeah.
And that's the first comment, right?
Yeah.
So now in terms of battling that public cloud, not battling necessarily, but integrating it as an offering, which I can't speak of because I haven't been following it lately. I just kind of grew up with the mainframe and everything else.
Sure.
You know what happened, right? You know. So who the competition? Bax and IBM, and then it's the same thing to me. It's all the same thing.
Yeah.
You know. But I don't know, or how do you see, but I guess I judge by the snicker in that how could they get back, and it's okay. That was my interpretation. How can they get back into this realm and offer another opportunity, you know, against the monolithic stuff, which they could be considered as well.
Oh, no.
You know what I'm saying?
Larry Ellison
did
not become who he is because he's stupid.
I know.
And Oracle is a powerful force in our industry, and not only a legacy force, but an innovative force. So there have been those who have questioned some of their acquisitions over the years, but there have been those who have questioned the acquisitions of EMC and those of Dell and those of
Microsoft
or whatever. So there's always those questions, but you know, folks like Oracle, their impact is in there. I mean, they've got relationship deep with all of the major manufacturers, all of the software providers, and they have to, but they also can end up directing a lot of this as well. And the innovation and the money that they're putting into both of these elements is one to be paying close attention to as well, because they're building this piece clearly as well today. And you can do that today with Oracle. You can do that picture today with Oracle. So absolutely they're in that game. Completely.
The other question I would have is like in terms of the public cloud, and it's more than just a preference, it's whatever happens. I wouldn't put sensitive data there. Okay? That's my take on it. Why this? You know, I get a drone and I fly it over this data center and whatever. That's silly. For example, in AWS we now use Infor, which is a loss-of ERP system, right, in accounting. So it's application as a service, but it's all hosted in the company Infor uses infrastructure as a service and through AWS, right? So inherently, you are running your stuff and hoping that they take care of your stuff and that they take care of, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah. Yeah.
It happens and
it happens and it will continue to happen. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
I understand.
It's,
I got
it's a thing. It's one of those things that we have to deal with. And we have to understand that as this world evolves,
right.
all of these elements are available today, but I'm not going to turn my infrastructure overnight into that. But none of us have those kind of resources. Also, I don't think it's a smart way to go. You need to evolve and build into it.
I agree.
But you're absolutely right. The public cloud today has enormous impact and reach, and rightly so. A lot of it offers an awful lot.
Thank you.
Well, I do not have a TV for you today. That's on Friday. And Brandon will be giving that away because I actually have to leave Thursday night, so we'll be here on Friday. But thanks for coming.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. And it feels good to just get up and talk about this stuff again. And hopefully it was worth your time. Thanks for coming.